There has been so much talk recently about all the info coming out about Total War Warhammer 3, whether it's the introduction of Grand Cathay, a mystic civilization that had not really been looked into too much by Games Workshop in terms of physical models. It could be a lack of a look into the campaign itself, or even how CA are going to evolve and take their battles to the next level. But there is nothing more polarizing than a good chat about Sieges and Total War. Their evolution over the years have gone from massive free-for-all grudge matches in Rome and Medieval 2 to maybe overpowered tower defense battles in something like Three Kingdoms, and now a new rework system for the next edition in Creative Assembly's powerhouse of a franchise. This is how Sieges have changed everything in Total War Warhammer 3. Okay, let's talk about the issues surrounding Sieges in these games in the past. You see, for me, Total War is about massive battles. It's about bringing massive armies together to fight for glory and superiority, no matter whether it's on the oceans, on the beaches, in forests, or in towns. And in my opinion, this is where I get my most enjoyment out of it. But Sieges have had their issues in the past. And whilst if I go into a game like Rome 1, fighting throughout the streets is one of the most satisfying things you can do, especially if you get pikemen and completely overpower your choke points. But there's always been a general consensus with Total War Sieges, or at least the more modern ones, that they've needed something more, something different. And I don't just mean changes to some of the AI movements within it, but just a general consensus that Sieges need development, something to make them more engaging as standalone battles, and not just a mean to an end in capturing marks on a bigger campaign map. So with all the massive amounts of information now coming out from Creative Assembly about the upcoming game Total War Warhammer 3, it was only a matter of time before we get a good in-depth look at what's going on with the new Siege maps, and of course the game mode as a whole. So what is the gist of this newly released video? Well, of course, as you can see, it focuses on Cathay, as we've been doing for the last few videos released on their YouTube channel. We can see a massive, beautiful capital city being attacked by oncoming armies, with outside troops as well coming to reinforce the defenders inside. One of the first things we're told about are massive new settlement maps, bigger than ever before, and with more variety than we've seen in any other Total War game. We get to see a 3-walled fortress with layers that provide some linear progression throughout the Siege game modes itself. Not just having one big movement within these Siege maps, but having many different zones, many different stages to each of the battles. So, the invaders start their attack run, and the first thing we get to see are those infamous towers. Towers have always been a massive part of Siege battles, whether they're small outposts on the palisades of a barbarian city in Rome 1, or they're the most overpowered machine gun turrets in something like Three Kingdoms. Towers now have wider capture areas. These are the places that the defenders have to sit in order to, well, capture the towers or keep them in your control. If the enemy manages to get over the wall and get in these capture areas, they can then take control of these infamous weapons. But this wider area of control means defenders don't need to be as close to keep them under their control. Now, whilst this is a smaller addition, I think this could have some knock-on effects that we're going to have to see is how well that's balanced throughout the game, because as I mentioned, siege towers have been very powerful in the past. Not just the other Warhammer games, but specifically Three Kingdoms, as I mentioned multiple times. They were really, really strong and tended to whittle down lighter units way before you even got to the walls in those previous titles. Now, is that realistic? In some cases, yes, but I do think in terms of gameplay there is a fine balance to get with that. Will these wider capture areas make them as OP as they were in Three Kingdoms? Possibly, but I guess we're going to have to find out on the receiving end to see how much they affect the attackers in general. But what happens when the walls fall? We can see the enemies start to climb up the ladders, and now it comes to personally the reason that I'm really excited about these new changes to the sieges: barricades, traps, and towers. There is now a new currency introduced to the Siege game mode, specifically when you're defending. You have these things called supplies. Supplies are pretty self-explanatory. You start with a base number once the match begins, and you can hold victory points across your town or city in order to gain them throughout the siege, or in some cases, lose them. On these points that you can see without the map, once you control them, you'll start gaining supplies. You can also use these areas to construct buildings or barricades throughout the points. Maybe you want to block up a street, change the way the enemy is attacking you, so you can choke point different parts of your city. This is where you can put barricades, or of course more towers. I'm assuming these are not going to be as powerful as the towers on the walls on the outside, yet they will still be good for helping pin down some enemies. Maybe your enemies are in hand-to-hand combat and you build some towers around them just to pick off the ones at the back that are maybe lighter armored. Now, we do get to see a look at the barricades within this trailer that we are shown. However, we don't really get much in-depth in terms of traps. I'm assuming they're going to be something similar to what we saw in Rome 2. Placeables that can be put down, in this case specifically in these areas, that are maybe spike traps that enemies can fall into, or maybe in Cathay's case, some magical inspired entrapments. But these are not permanent. All these constructibles can be destroyed by the enemy, or if they take over one of these minor supplies, key buildings, or victory points that are captured throughout the city, these objects will fall as well. So they are paramount to capturing and holding certain points of your city in order to gain the upper hand in certain stages of the battle. By the way, attackers can't then take these points and then build upon them. That's just a defender's advantage. But this edition excites me. It is a really good thing for dynamically changing the way the battles play out and putting that power within the defender's hands. They can completely decide where the enemy can go. They can choose the points that they want to heavily pin down and which ones they maybe want to let go a little bit to try and sway the enemy to fall into one of their traps. Not only this, but the sieges themselves, the maps that we mentioned that are bigger and more variable than ever before, are also way more orientated towards this dynamic siege play. Now there are so many tiers that aren't just the walls above and around the cities. For example, bridges or balconies that you can position range troops, archers, javelin men to throw down upon enemies, in conjunction with ambushing people throughout the streets, hiding men behind buildings and in alleyways in order to jump out upon the enemy. This adds so much more and adds so much more consideration when it comes to the depth of the planning phases within the sieges, improving it so much as just a standalone battle mode. And I think these dynamic and temporary placements are one of my favourite things that have been recently added within the Total War games. Overall, it seems to be a really positive response from the community. People really needed something new. I think CA have given us this much needed refresh for the Siege game modes, and it really looks to be heading in the right direction. In terms of fleshing out Siege battles themselves, giving way more use to strategy and dynamically changing battles throughout your matches, this is the way to do it. And I think this is something that's going to give so much more credence, as there have been some frustrations towards the way that battles and sieges have gone in the more recent Total Wars. But let me know what you think down below. Do you think this is the right direction that Creative Assembly are going? I'm so happy that we're seeing this now, and there seems to be such an influx of new information coming out with Warhammer, so I'll be trying to bring it to you as soon as possible. But please let me know down in the comments below. Leave a like on the video if you enjoyed it, leave a dislike, and make sure you abuse me in the comments if you didn't. I mean, it all helps the algorithm, am I right? But until then, I will see you in the next one.